Welcome to Masters of Regeneration Radio. Conversations with humans who dare to reimagine our place on planet Earth. Earth is changing fast. Evolution happening in real time. An intimate, circular understanding of nature and living systems. We are the land. The land is us. Michael, welcome to Masters of Regeneration Radio. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
So, Michael Mazourek is co-founder of Row 7 Seeds. And Michael, just 50 years ago, there were many, many small farmers and small family-owned companies that owned and distributed seeds in the U.S. It's not the case today. What's happened? If we can jump right into the subject.
Sure. Yeah, and I think, I come from one of those small family farms that used to be a seed distributor too. The landscape, changed a lot. If you dial back before, the 50 years before that, there was, a lot of the seeds were being developed by universities. They would be where people would go to access new technology, new developments, and actually tangibly get new seeds. And there was a gradual, and well, I guess it's been speeding up, the proprietariness of some of the background of the where the seeds come from, and much more of a product. So you have the F1 hybrids as a way to be able to have intellectual property control over a seed product. But everything just really changed dramatically when you have the advent of utility patents on seeds. So it's the ability to claim ownership, not just over the seed you bred, but the combination of characteristics that is in this. So no one can recreate that, not with your seeds, which is a problem, or not come up with another way to do it, which can be a problem. And the ability to patent and own so strictly made seed companies fit into the business model of chemical companies. And I think that is some of the major change in the context that's been damaging to the food system.
Yeah. So if I get it correctly, so let's say in the past I was a seed breeder, do you call it?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
And so I would save seeds for the following year, and I would select for different characteristics and the seeds, and my objective was to create more food or better food and more flavorful food, and so if I understand correctly, what you're saying is that chemical companies are kind of like building an ecosystems of steps that involve not only the seed but all their pesticides and fungicides and fertilizers and all that, and they're selling you like the whole shebang, like the package.
Yep, that's it. It can be increasingly challenging for some seeds to find them without this pesticide, insecticide, chemical coating. So you have treated seeds where these insecticides, pesticides, fungicides are on the seeds. So when you buy them, they're pre-coated and with agents that are designed to be taken up systemically into the plant.
Wow.
And so from their business point of view, they're in they're chemical companies. They sell these pesticides, so it's a great efficiency. They would view it to be able to deliver a product, the complete kit, really, where you're getting their pesticide pre-applied to your seed. So it's kind of one step. And but and at the same time, there's a lot of people that don't want that on their seeds, don't want that in their foods, don't want to be growing in those conditions. And so the tension is kind of twofold. One is, given people's interest in moving to an agroecological production system, often in the U.S., this is an organic production system, what are the seeds they have available that are adapted to thrive in the more natural system, or can they even access them if increasingly stuff is chemically coated before you get in the ground? The other aspect is looking at the long arc of plant breeding. You were describing it well. Thousands of years ago, it was people simply saving seed from like the best things they were eating, and just a matter of like, oh, wouldn't it be better? We'd like to have more of this one next year. Let's save the seed and replant it. That was some of the primitive plant breeding that was, also really powerful. It took us from wild ancestors, things we'd recognize as weeds today, to the crops we grow to nourish ourselves, and from the grocery store or restaurant, growing gardens. And that whole process and into the future, what it needs to be based on is saving the seeds from the best, replanting it, someone doing this, and the ability to cross-pollinate the best of the best to make things better. It's a facilitated evolution, and where it comes into play is as we think about, with these big seed companies, they look at big markets. They're in the U.S. are typically, for many of the crops I would probably talk about anyway, would have their major centers of production in Florida and California. Mm-hmm. And so that's their target for product development. And so then what it leads to, what would you grow in New York or Nebraska or Montana or Virginia? You would be growing something that was developed with California or Florida in mind, and it might also fit you too pretty well. It might work okay, but what Row 7 is really trying to advocate for in the long run is how can we restore systems where we have healthy, for us in the environment, ecological food production, the right nutrition choices, and restore a system of people working on seeds that are meant to thrive in all these regions. So wherever you are listening to this, imagine if your local food system is the seed that's being planted into that isn't an afterthought, but is actually intentionally curated, intentionally fitted to thrive, and your local farmer isn't just making do with the best fit they could find.
Okay, and how does that work? How do you do that? How do you, I mean, the system of industrial agriculture kind of seed that comes coated with pesticides and fungicides and are designed to like go into the plant and all that. That sounds eerily familiar to what medicine has done to us, right? Like give kids a ton of antibiotics and all that stuff, and you end up attacking the ecosystem around, the bacteria and all that, right? I would imagine that's what happens to the soil as well. And so,
indeed,
how do you work with that interface of organic seed and healthier soils and more diverse crops, I guess, or food production systems anyway?
Yeah, and I think the key to it all is the chef. That's why it's so prominent in how we approach things. If you my other role, I'm also a professor, a plant breeder at the university, and one of the challenges we saw was for us to be able to create plants that would thrive in these conditions. How do we get them out really into farmers' hands so they can be used, as we've kind of lost that bridge? So for a lot of plant breeders, the problem that's posed to them is to be able to make a plant better, but not change it. Right? There's these commodity aesthetics. So, like a bell pepper should be a perfect cube. People may be familiar with like these little snacking peppers that are so convenient and delicious, and like in terms of size and colors, and but so those are some products that didn't have an easy road into the marketplace because they were different. When the conversations, experiences that led to Row 7 founding was with working on a miniature butternut squash, where we've removed like all the water weight that's a common way to get yield in crops. As we shrunk it and really concentrated the nutrition and the flavor, it was not well received by the conventional food system because it looked different. A butternut squash should be like this. So as we are, one of the things that we try to get diversity in and make progress as we make change, you might expect things to look different. Chefs can be a great ambassador of that, where things taste different. They can introduce people to those tastes. If something looks different, or you do something different with the kitchen, they can introduce those dishes, then people know what to do, and suddenly something that seemed really inaccessible is just so within arm's reach to know what to do with it when you get it home. So
great. Yeah.
Yes, that's so a central piece of what we do, and how the chefs, in the farm to table movement have been really helped kind of those smaller small to medium sized farmers that are using what I would call the right practices really have an opportunity to continue, and now it's kind of extending onto the seeds, which is part of the system for sure.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Why do you think the mainstream consumer is looking for that square bell pepper and all those vegetables that look all exactly the same? And there's been this huge loss in variety.
There has, yeah. I'm not really sure. We've tried different ways to help do that. I think I know where we can get the change is by some of the more rapid social communication, as people are sharing through social media their experiences of eating and what they're growing, and you can get change faster that way. I think because things don't seem as foreign. You're seeing other people, your friends, growing and eating these things, and that helps you get there. I think the other thing is that we've not really been exposed to that, I guess, as I figure out why maybe there's been a barrier. That we've had such a commodity system, and I think so many people. I was raised in this commodity system where if you go to the store to get a certain thing from the vegetable section, you kind of have a picture in your mind of what you're going to get, and it probably goes back to some, it would look really similar to like a coloring book you would have had in grade school, or a connect the dots thing. So you have these very uniform static images of what we're eating. That fits well into the commodity system, which is kind of why it's reinforced. So you'll get something from somewhere in the world that looks like it, and so you buy it just based on how it looks on the shelf often.
Would there be any chance you could walk us through how you go about creating this, say, butternut squash you were talking about? Like, how does that, like, the cooking of the seed happen? Like, how do you create that? Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, so I'm often looking at lots of varieties of vegetables. If someone sees a seed catalog and sees the varieties that a company offers, out in the world, there's easily 1,000 times for every crop that diversity out in nature. So I am working with a much broader and a really unfiltered set of seeds. And what we're looking to see is which ones do we want to make pairings? Which ones do we want to combine their characteristics? And sometimes it'd be delicious and disease resistant. Sometimes it'd be something that's really orange with something that's really sweet. And we do this combination, like a chef. If you're in the kitchen, you wouldn't pour them both into the same pot and stir. For us, we do that with a cross pollination. So like bees would do in a garden, but we're just being prescriptive about the pairings. And then as we save the seeds in a couple of generations, all the different permutations of all the characteristics of the plants come out. And then it's a matter of how you find the best. I've painted it as a very binary approach, and we'd like to have something much more diverse and broad. That's a good place to start. But then it's a matter of, how are you then going to select the best? How are you defining the best? Is it the most yield per acre? And that's your main priority? Is it something that fits a given market category, would fit the grocery store SKU, and then maybe have something else that's a little value added to that? Or is it going to be something that you would just love to eat more of? What took us to the mini butternut is this dual epiphany the Chef Dan Barber and I had in the kitchen as we looked at what he was doing with his squash in the kitchen, what I was finding we were doing in the field to make it better, and just realizing we were both trying to concentrate flavor and nutrition. And he had insight into how I could do it better by roasting the squash to try to get these caramelized flavors. And I was doing it by shrinking the squash and removing water based on selecting the squash that were drier.
Yeah.
And the fun couple of seasons when we were really getting going is every squash that I thought was promising, I'd cut in half. I would roast half. And if I was excited about it, I would just send him a box of shrink-wrapped squash halves for him to roast in his kitchen. And we had a great dialogue back and forth, each talking about the same squash, kind of long distance.
Oh, that's great. That sounds awesome. And if you're trying to breed, you're trying to create a seed that's more disease resistant. How do you do that? Is it because you're selecting the stronger plant specimens, or if you're working with organic seeds or heirloom seeds and you're not working with any biocides, let's say, like how do you do that?
Right. So, disease resistance. There's kind of two approaches. They'll look the same initially. Plants have immune systems that have some analogies to ours. So, like weeds, you seldom see dying from a disease. Is their immune system is evolving. There's resistance naturally out there. So, what we're often doing is just finding the plant we love, but it has this disease issue, and finding a plant that might not be great in any other way, but it is resistant to the disease, and you cross-pollinate them and expose them to the disease, and the survivors, make it to the next round, the next generation, and then it's a matter of, does it need more disease resistance? Then do that cross, or does it need more flavor and do that cross? The fragile nature of that approach can be if you just find one gene that's providing great resistance, and when you do that, so you have a very simply inherited, very strong resistance, and that's a powerful tool that's very tempting to deploy, and we often do initially. Like penicillin, when it first came out, was one of the ways to make us healthy. Plant immune system is similar, and we know the challenges with that is if you just have one kind of lock on the door, one thing protecting you, if something, it's very easy for a pathogen to evolve around that, similar to antibiotic resistance in hospitals. In plants, the dangerous thing is once you're really successful at that initial stage of plant breeding, or often people use genetic engineering to also try that same kind of silver bullet approach. If you're really successful initially, then you're growing big fields of just that one variety with just that one line of defense. And once the pathogen can overcome it in one plant, your whole field, your whole acreage gets lost very easily. There was an incident in the 70s when the new great technology came out in corn, and in Texas, it turned out they were susceptible to disease, and it wiped out billions of dollars, thousands of acres of corn. That was a big agricultural loss and a food system loss, and really pointed out how vulnerable that approach is. And just, it's so shocking that even knowing that, we haven't really changed our how we approach things that much.
Yeah.
So I'll say there is great potential to look for more complex disease resistances, and those are the durable ones where you're adding layers and layers of small incremental bits of disease resistance, and that's how you get this durable, long-lasting resistance. And working with populations that are variable, so that if one plant can get the disease, not all its neighbors won't go down. And so,
Gotcha.
There's the business as it was done, and then the approach like Row 7 is trying to do with better access to seeds and this diversity for people to push these population approaches forward.
Beautiful. So if I'm a farmer and I'm interested in reconnecting to a more complex understanding of how I manage this ecosystem where I'm going to grow food, and I know that I have to think about the soil, and I know that I have to think about the seed and all that, but I'm still like, I might have that reference. I might think, oh my God, if I'm planting, I don't know, romaine lettuce and butternut squash, and I get a disease and my 10 acres get wiped out, I'm just gonna be bankrupt, or like what are all those obstacles that could be in people's minds, and what can we do about it? Like how can we promote more? How would you encourage someone to take the first step?
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. So the one of the key approaches to resilience and stable resilience is working with diversity, and in every level. If someone is looking at their retirement fund, they probably have a balanced portfolio for a similar reason. It's a way to manage risk and ensure that you'll make progress. So as you look on a farm, when you start with the soil, that's not just small particles of earth and rock that's alive and should be alive with microbes. And so looking at how to ensure there's a good microbial community through growing a diversity of crops and having rotations and being mindful about what you add. So in general, organic things that will break down because they had a biological origin will return and cycle. That's good. There are some, if you're starting with a soil that hasn't had that history, there's a way to jumpstart it. So you see compost and compost teas are just alive with microorganisms. That's a good way to get the beneficial microbes in your soil. And as you plant, being thoughtful about not using the seeds that have the non-biological pesticides on them, and any opportunity you have to hybrids are not always, hybrids aren't in themselves a challenge or negative, but it's kind of how you use them. If you were to plant a whole acre to one hybrid, you essentially have an acre of just where all the plants are clones. And so ways that you can have diversity through multiple hybrids or an open pollinated population, that will help. And then thinking about how you have the rotations and cover cropping, things you can do to keep life in the soil. Mm-hmm. And if you have the plants and decomposition and everything cycling through the soil, you will end up with a biological system that eventually can maintain itself, not without intervention and cultivation. But
wonderful.
Yeah.
That makes, me as a consumer, as an eater, I think it makes a lot of sense too. Not only from a health perspective, but from a flavor perspective and from a variety perspective. I remember those images that were on Dan Barber's article of a romaine lettuce, was it? Or something like that. It was just like most people are probably know one type or two types of romaine lettuce.
Or just know that there's romaine lettuce. My specialty has been the butternut squash. So as I go out, and when I'm thinking of butternut squash, I'm not thinking about here's this butternut. I don't recognize them all in person, but I know there's at least 50 different cultivars that are grown and being cycled through and probably present in different stores, different markets, different gardens in a region at any given time. Some more than others. Thinking about lettuces, there's interesting trends there for sure, led by chefs, as we look at going from was the predominant kind of iceberg wedge in the U.S. salads for so long, and as you saw the move to the baby leafy greens, you just see the French culinary tradition take hold, led by chefs, where they're adopting these other cultures in the food that they're presenting. As that takes off in the marketplace, it's a system that instead of having this uniformity for this head, to have this great diversity, where all the different shapes and patterns and colors of the leaves that give it its loft and its brilliance in the baby leaf salads kind of takes off, and all these farmers that are now able to have production through other types of the year they couldn't before, and kind of boost their economies. So sorry, I talked about the lettuce I'm excited about, but lettuce is certainly one of those where you can really see how a chef can drive diversity and how people can benefit from that. And by the way, those little leaves are much more nutritious than the bigger leaves on the iceberg or the romaine.
Okay.
So.
And then there's we can go even deeper into, I remember an image of was it you? It was probably you were working on some purple peas, right?
I have, yes. They're out in the world now. My Beauregard snow peas are out in the world. I love seeing the photos of people growing them and enjoying them.
What is how do you how is a pea purple? So that people, understand this next level of breeding, and why does it matter, right?
Right. Yeah. No, that's a good one. As a topic of both of something fun that my kids are enjoying, and also it speaks to the ecology of it. So the purple is from anthocyanins. So the same antioxidants that are prized in blueberries and raspberries. Much of our fruit has these pigments in it that are there to protect the plants from oxidation in sun, and our bodies use them in a similar way. There's also beneath those red and purple colors a lot of other antioxidants. What you'll hear about, the superfood things that they'll find in soy or red wine, these flavonoids. And so in peas, a lot of us have had that high school biology class where you look at a Punnett square and Mendel's pea, the one that's like the white flowers and the purple flowers, and there's that 3-to-1 ratio. Maybe people blocked that out on purpose. But but that sets up this dichotomy of the white and the purple flowered, and almost all the peas grown have white flowers. They all have white flowers because the humans cultivating them made a choice not that long ago, have all white flowered, because once you have white flowers, you don't have any risk for this bitterness or astringency in the plant. When you can the peas, right? Everybody loves a can of canned peas.
Yeah.
If you have the purple flowers, you'll get a little bit of anthocyanin produced in the peas, and they'll stain the juice in the can kind of grayer than it was. But in nature, and for the cover crop peas that survive the winter, they have purple flowers, and it's not just because they haven't been improved, it's because the plants are more resilient. When you put a seed in the ground, when the seed falls in the ground, the plant's going to grow there. It has its physicality and its structure, but otherwise the only way it has to defend itself to be able to bring in pollinators, repel pests and disease, is largely through chemistry. Plants are fantastic chemists. For me, that's why I got so excited about working with plants. And so we see this purple pigment, but that's just evidence of all the compounds they're making to defend themselves in their environment and all that other nutrition. So what we've done with this purple pea, the Beauregard pea, is beyond the purple flowers, we can actually get into the purple pod. So even if you're not growing the pea, still the harvested part you have in your hand, and you can see it's the purple. So as people are growing or buying those, then farmers are planting seeds that are naturally more resilient. They're more drought resistant, heat stress, cold stress. They germinate better, more pest resistant, potentially better nitrogen fixers. And so what we did is we selected for peas. We said, okay, we're going to insist they're going to be purple, but we're going to see if we can find ones that are not, or much less bitter, much less astringent, and have a sweetness that balances that out. So the result is a plant that's more nutritious, should be more ecologically fit, and with it carries a lesson about often when people encounter things they don't like or don't understand, they look to erase it. Yeah. And in fact, there's a chance to do some diplomacy, and even we can go back and kind of correct some of these. Now that we have a better appreciation for the functions of them, and we have some of the understanding to be able to work with them, we can, in hindsight, go back. And so Beauregard is going back and selecting for more natural resistance and nutrition, now that we can recognize the importance of that. And luckily, through seed saving and the USDA seed banks, we have these materials that are not patent protected, so we can freely select from them and cross with them. And as Row 7 releases peas like Beauregard, where we've broken through and have this breakthrough where you have the resilience without the bitterness, it's also something that's out there for everyone else to continue to improve on, or find what it needs to work in your region, and someone to make that cross-pollination and select a pea that thrives wherever they are.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I love how it's you're sort of improving flavor and nutrition and variety. In the past 10, 15 years, the culinary world has seen this sort of like rediscovering of the landscape, and it's such a rich experience to see that there's many different colors of that vegetable that you knew as just one thing, right? It just opens up the panorama and the experience so much.
And also we have as we've learned more about what's behind the scenes in the metabolism of the plants, we can also now show that if you're looking for a more flavorful vegetable, it's not just something you're kind of doing selfishly because you enjoy it. It's also the flavor compounds, especially aroma compounds, actually derive from essential nutrients often. So as you're finding these aromas, that you find these rich that adds to the complexity of the food, the complexity of the flavor, or maybe a key aroma like in a tomato or watermelon. These are actually, kind of coming from those essential nutrients themselves, so they're really linked.
That's amazing. So they're a direct reflection of the health of the soil or the health of the plant, right? Is that correct?
They are, yeah,
Yeah.
and also it's part of a health of the plant too is to have a little bit of stress. Like
Okay.
doing your taxes is not the type of stress, but exercising is a good stress. Yeah, and
Yeah.
so yeah, it all links together.
Great. So if I want to grow some veggies in my backyard in Florida or in California or in can I buy your seeds and experiment with them or not?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
We have Row 7 Seeds and row7seeds.com, and you can find everything from a packet, and maybe you can put a couple pea seeds in a pot on your windowsill or balcony, or you can buy the big bag and hop on your tractor and do a couple acres. The full scale.
Very
And
cool.
one of the things that we're working to do, we have a very active feedback loop. And so in addition to things that are the finished varieties, we also have things that aren't finished yet, and still are, you get the prototypes, the slightly variable populations that aren't where we want them to go yet, but rather than waiting until we get them how we want them, we have a chance we share them earlier. So you'll see our experimental varieties are things that aren't done yet, but why wait? We'd love to share them with everyone now and to get your feedback.
And so those are seeds that would grow specifically in latitudes sort of like covered within the U.S. or is that something that you could try elsewhere in
You can
similar
try elsewhere
climates?
for
Okay.
sure. Yeah, and there's some crops like the peas. You're not going to want to plant in your Florida summer. So the cooler you can get them. There are other crops like the cucumbers that are broadly adapted and tend to do well everywhere. One of the things, the only thing that's really limiting where we share, with someone can't find some part of their season to work is, there are some things for seeds between different countries where we have to make sure we go through the proper protocols to make sure, we're not spreading any disease along as we're trying to share great new seeds.
Awesome. That's great. Michael, is there anything you're excited about that we haven't covered that you'd like to share? Anything else?
Oh, we covered a lot of the ground.
Okay.
One of the things that we're really thinking about now is how to increase the diversity in terms of mixtures of seeds. So where we could put a variety of different peas all in the same packet. So we have our trial pea mix now has the red and more. And so I think that's an exciting place for us. And it's been so exciting. We were calling ourselves plant breeders before, as the world has kind of somewhat recently discovered as seed breeders has caught on, and we embrace that. But I think it's the other thing, a lot of the innovations people are seeing is there's been limited but real and very useful funding in the U.S., especially through some of the farm bills and other programs. We hear a lot of challenges in D.C., but there's some of the good taxpayer dollars and things that people have advocated for towards supporting work, not just myself, but at other institutions, organizations across the U.S. So the system is still viable, needs more support. We've been so grateful for what we've gotten, and I think it can show people how much maybe more we can do as we continue to push this movement forward for like natural, healthy food for everybody.
Wonderful. Well, Michael, thank you so much. Thank you so much for the insights. I love the story of the squash and the purple pea. And yeah, thank you so much for your work.
Well, thank you, and I'm so excited for, with Row 7, we now have this way to share it, so it's not just on my shelf. So thank you for helping me tell my stories. Thank you.
Oh, beautiful. You're so welcome. All right, Michael. Take care, and thank you so much.
Yep, thank you, Tom.
Bye-bye.